You're listening to the Sass Says podcast. I'm your host, Christy Rocha, also known as Sass. I identify as a woman, a wife, and a mother. That should tell you a lot already. And over the last few years, I've learned the value of talk therapy. I have seen how my inner work not only enhances my own well-being, but also my marriage, my parenting, my relationships. And in fact, you wouldn't be hearing this right now if it weren't for the work I've done. My mission is to debunk the misconceptions and stigmas around what therapy is and who it's for. Let's normalize working on our mental health and seeking help when needed. We've all heard of self-care, self-help, and self-love, but do you often wonder how to actually make it all happen? I do. You'll hear strategy-based conversations with professionals, as well as inspiring and validating stories from women who are just like you and me. Think of this podcast as the weekly therapy sessions you didn't know you needed, with a dash of sass, a lot of vulnerability, and me, relentlessly asking, but how?
Hello, and welcome to the show. Today I'm joined by Amy Kartheiser. Amy is the founder and principal designer of Amy Kartheiser Interiors and the founder of the nonprofit organization called Under the Same Sky. Today you will hear about Amy's journey to her nonprofit, which began with the tragic loss of her brother Mark by suicide. This heartbreaking event propelled her to create a space for those who have experienced similar losses to heal and find support. Her organization raises funds for the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, specifically for their Healing Conversations program. This program connects individuals who have experienced similar losses, allowing them to have meaningful conversations and feel less alone in their grief. Amy's story, her work, her mission, her purpose are all so much better said in her words, so here she is.
Hey, Amy. So nice to meet you. Thanks for being here with me today.
Oh, Christy, thank you for inviting me. This is a great pleasure to be here today with you. So thank you.
Yeah, of course. We have a lot to get into here. The part of my brain that is Luann's daughter wants to ask you about your interior design world. And I kind of have to shut that off for a moment, especially since I was just in a meeting with her and her team and going over some stuff for Luann Live. So my brain is on that. But we are here more specifically today to talk about, of course, mental health, what it means to you, your nonprofit. Why don't you start by sharing a little bit about your nonprofit, and we'll go from there.
Okay. So I have a nonprofit. It's a 509(c)(3), and it is called Under the Same Sky. And I lost my brother to suicide. It's been about 8 years now. And suicide is a really difficult death for all of those who are grieving. And that doesn't mean all other deaths are not as difficult. I know that they are. We've all experienced some type of loss in our lives, but there's a big difference with suicide in that it leaves the family and friends who are left behind very isolated. And the isolation comes from people not knowing what to say or what to do. So they say or do nothing. And I was never a leader, per se at school or in the classroom or among my friends. I wasn't necessarily a follower. I would kind of stand back and watch. But after losing my brother to suicide and seeing what it did to my family, I almost felt catapulted on a journey to do more. And his death gave me purpose, and it helped me find a voice that I didn't know I had anymore. So I created Under the Same Sky for people who have lost family members or loved ones to suicide, so that we have a place to turn to heal ourselves. And we give all of the money that we raise, we give to American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. And that is because they were a wonderful organization and a huge support to me and my family after we lost my brother. But they have a very specific area within their organization called Healing Conversations. And Healing Conversations helps those that have lost loved ones to suicide by giving them a place to have a conversation with someone who has also lost someone. So they have all these people that you can connect with, and they allow you this one-time conversation, which is amazing because I found in my journey that so many people reach out to me who know someone who lost
Mm.
someone to suicide. So they lost, my friend lost her brother, my friend lost her son, my aunt lost her, niece, something like that. And I have been connected to hundreds of people over the last few years who need a conversation from someone who understands. So my goal with Under the Same Sky is to take all this money that we raise and really build out this healing conversations. Because quite frankly, after I lost my brother, I didn't even know there was a healing conversations at AFSP. So we're trying to make it a really strong network so that there are more people involved. We've got more people who want to volunteer to be on phone calls so that you don't just get that one phone call, that you can have a phone call at 3 a.m. when you can't sleep, that you can have a phone call, quite frankly, 5 or 10 years down the line when you're reliving everything, or something triggered you, or you had a moment where you're missing that person and you don't know how to cope. So that's what Under the Same Sky does. And that's why we started it. And it's only been 3 years, but it's been an incredible success. We've really been quite successful in just our network in Chicago. And I'm really proud of what we're doing.
Very cool. The organization, I should
Yeah.
clarify, the organization is very cool. I didn't realize the connection to the healing conversations. I think that is such a unique element that I didn't know existed either.
Yeah.
I'm very sorry, of course, to hear about your brother.
Thank
Was
you.
he an older or younger brother? Where did that?
He's an older. So I have a family of, I have 5 siblings. I'm
Oh,
number
wow.
5 of 6. So the 2 oldest are boys who are identical twins. And sadly, one
Mm,
of them, Mark and Matt, but Mark is the one who lost his battle with mental illness and died by suicide.
mm.
And it's really interesting.
I'm sorry, did you say Mark or Matt?
His name was Mark. So he has a brother. My brother Matt is still here. But my brother Mark is the one who lost his life to suicide. And, taking a perspective of a sibling is one thing. You have this lifelong dreams and of that you had with this person that were still going to continue, or memories
Mhm.
that started, when I was born. They were, gosh, my brothers are 7.5 years older than me. So my brother Mark, he's the one who taught me how to ride a bike. You just have so many magical. We went on family vacations every summer, all stuffed in, all
Right.
8 of us in a station wagon, and we drove down to Florida in the middle of summer. We drove out to Colorado, and just the fun we would have, together as a family, or even in our home. He died at the age of 52,
Mm,
which, many people think this is, people are dealing with their mental health. It's not always something that you're dealing with your entire life. So
mm,
it's not something that people, I know they've got a lot of children right now coming off of the pandemic and the isolation that it left so many people with, still reeling from it. And that runs the spectrum on age. But my brother was always a really happy-go-lucky guy and life of the party, and just so endearing, and always remembered to ask you about you and remember the last conversation you had, so he could refer back to something that you were working on or doing in your life that was really important to you. And he had a smile that would light up a room every time he walked in. And he went through a really hard time in his life and wasn't able to share that with anyone, and not even his identical twin brother, who he was really close with. So Mark battled this all on his own. He was married, he had children,
mm.
and he didn't let on this secret he was keeping. And it breaks my heart to think about what he that he kept going on as the happy-go-lucky guy, even though he was suffering so much all day long. And I think about when he would go to bed at night, trying to probably close his eyes to get all the voices out of his head, and all of those things that he was telling himself about his life, and that he did that alone, like, just really breaks my heart.
Yeah.
But what I found really interesting from, going back to the siblings is my brother, who was his identical twin. They were both going to find their own way going to college, but ended up going to the same college. They both were going to pledge different fraternities, but pledged the same fraternity. They were going to join different clubs, but they were both in rugby and lacrosse together. I mean, they couldn't get away from each other because they were so connected.
Yeah.
And had the same friends and liked the same things. They were both, worked hard in sales, but also artists. And I have their artwork around my home. But to hear my brother Matt, what really broke my heart after Mark's death was to hear my brother Matt say, I literally feel like I lost half of myself. Like, and I don't know how. He almost didn't know who he was as a individual.
Yeah.
And 6 months after Mark died, they had their birthday coming up, and he said, I don't even know how to celebrate my birthday by myself. So he had to learn this journey of not only, continuing on as a son to my mom and dad and a sibling to us four girls, but as not a twin on his own anymore. And that I just thought was eye-opening to me, because that was things I didn't think about during my journey, and just really heartbreaking. So
I can't, no, I mean, it's next level. It's
yeah, right.
it's
I
up
mean,
a
you hear about
notch.
those bonds, right? That
Yes.
identical twins have or twins have, and
Yes.
that's what they had.
Yeah.
And it is really, it's sad, but he's
Yeah.
doing great. Matt's doing
Yeah.
great.
I have my brothers are named Mark and Matt too, so it's just
Oh my
interesting.
gosh,
Yeah.
Christy, that's
It's wild.
crazy.
Yeah. They're not twins, but they're Mark and Matt. Like it's funny that you're
And
saying
you
them.
probably call them, ours are not Matt and Mark, they're Mark and Matt. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's how you refer to them, but
We're
they're always
Mark and
Mark and
Matt.
Matt. Yeah.
Yeah, Mark and Matt. That's so
That is,
funny.
wow. I
Yeah.
have goosebumps. That's
Yeah,
great.
I
And thank
know.
you for
As
sharing
soon
that.
as you said that, I was like, whoa.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, and so, going back to you though, what happened in between the time of this happening to the nonprofit? Like what did your journey look like? How did you cope with the grief, and what did you do for yourself in that time to sort of get to the place where you could have a voice and create this amazing space?
Sure. Thank you. So I say initially, I got in touch with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. I started, looking online,
Mhm.
for organizations. In my head, me and my sisters were like, we're going to build this great not-for-profit. We're going to build this organization, and only to find there's a lot out there. But we had never been in the space.
Right.
We needed to research
Right.
survivors of suicide or lost by suicide. So
Mhm.
we didn't know how many organizations were out there. And I really connected with American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, what they were doing. And if you don't mind, I'm going to refer to them as AFSP the rest
Sure.
of the conversation, because it's a mouthful and it
Sure.
gets jumbled in my mouth sometimes. But they do these walks. And so a few months after Mark died, they were having their Chicagoland walk. And I decided to, as a family, like, let's do this. Let's sign up for this. Let's do this walk, and we were all gung ho. And we needed to come up with a name for our team, because everyone has these team names. And then you can also do fundraising if you wish for AFSP. So the interesting part is 2 weeks after my brother died, my dad had some business over in Vietnam, and he wasn't going to go. He did not want to travel. He was obviously still in a world of grief, but my brother always told him how proud he was of him, that he did this work. He taught students overseas.
Wow.
So he's like, you know what? I'm going to go. Mark believed in me. He wanted me to do this. So I'm going to go on my trip. And a couple days into my dad's travel, he took a picture and emailed all of us that, I mean, if you've been to Vietnam, there's not a lot of skyscrapers, there's not a lot of tall buildings, but there is one really huge tall building in the, just off the waters, and huge lit up letters called Forever Mark.
Whoa.
And I know, isn't that crazy? I
Oh, I
mean,
just
I've
got a
now come
chill.
to learn that
Yeah.
Forever Mark is jewelry. And so now I see these signs when I walk by jewelry stores around Chicagoland. I see signs for like, beautiful diamond ring by Forever Mark. But at the time, we didn't know.
Yeah.
So that became our team name, Forever Mark.
Oh, wow.
So, I mean, he actually just sent us that picture and said, I came across this building today. And me and my sister at the exact same time wrote back, that's our team name.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like, and that's not what he
It's
was
a
thinking.
literal sign.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah.
It's it. So that became our team name. And we gathered at the lakefront with all of these survivors of suicide. And it was so impactful for me to be surrounded by all these people who were grieving the same way we were,
Yeah.
who had all this guilt that we had, who had a lot, woulda, coulda, shouldas that went on for a mile long of conversations we should have had with Mark, or things we should have done, signs that we missed, and to be around all these people, like I felt like, it wasn't the experience of all my siblings, but I felt like I was kind of in a group hug and in a safe
Mm,
place.
mm.
And it felt really, really good to me. And so I started raising money for these walks, and I started doing really well at raising money, to the point where the CEO of AFSP actually flew me out to New York for their big gala,
Wow.
and at Lincoln Center. And me and was able to bring a guest. So I flew my sister out there who lives in Maine, and she met me, and we had a wonderful evening at their gala. And it was really, Anderson Cooper spoke that night. It was super
Wow.
impressive. Yeah. And I just kept thinking, like, I want to do more. What can I do? So funny enough, 3 months after that, I found myself on an airplane headed to visit my girlfriend who lived in the south of France. And we were going to go shopping at these brocantes, these antique markets. And I just started buying things and thinking, what if I open up my studio space as an interior designer, and I sell all these wonderful things I find, and I raise more money for AFSP?
Wow.
Like 100% of the profits will go towards AFSP. So I did that trip in August, and I shipped a container home, and I got that in, March. And then I had my first, I called it a pop-up shop.
Mhm.
And it was Thursday night. Everyone, paid a ticket, $65, and came, I had food out that I had catered, I had drinks, and I had a DJ, and I was making it a really beautiful event. This wasn't a sad event. I never
Mhm.
want these events to be sad. I just want us to all be in a room and be able to feel connected and be able to talk about a topic that a lot of people aren't comfortable talking about.
Yeah.
So it was a huge success. I mean, I sold out of everything that I bought and raised about 15,000 extra dollars.
Wow.
So I continued on this journey of having pop-up shops and traveling, and I'd have them once or twice a year. And then it just started getting to a point where I thought, I want to do more.
Mm.
Now I've done this. I want to keep doing this, but I also want to do more. And that's where coming up with the idea to have a charity, something bigger that we could raise more money.
Mm.
And the idea behind raising the money for Healing Conversations came to be from the phone calls and the texts and the people finding me on Instagram, because I'm very open about my journey and about my brother dying by suicide, that have reached out to me saying, can you help a friend? Can you help me? Can you talk to my brother-in-law? Can you? And
Mhm.
that's where I thought, like, we as survivors don't really have a place to turn, and we still need to feel connected. And this is a way for us to feel connected.
Yeah. Yeah. How do you, I don't know. I'm going to choose my words carefully. I was going to say protect yourself, but I don't know that that's the right way to phrase it. But when you have so many people reaching out to you,
for help and advice and wanting a conversation, how do you keep yourself okay? Like, I imagine being, talking about this all the time. Are you triggered? Do you have any rituals or any routines in place to kind of keep yourself in the right mindset, or does it totally overwhelm you at times? Like, how do you cope with this sort of being something that you're talking about a lot and people are coming to you, and it's a painful thing for you, so
Right.
I'm just curious how you make that work.
Yeah, that's a really I love that question, because I haven't been asked it before, and I don't know how to explain it. I think at the beginning of this talk, I said I was kind of catapulted on a journey that I didn't know I was ever gonna have,
Mhm,
and so talk there's this phrase that AFSP has always used, and I strongly believe in it, and it's talk saves lives.
mm,
And talk saves lives for so many reasons. It saves lives for survivors, which are the people who've lost loved ones, that if we can continue to talk about our journey and begin to have, talk about our grief or what we've experienced, like we're going to just heal even more on the inside.
mm,
So it's incredibly healing to me
mhm,
to I try not to talk about myself when people want to talk to me, but to have people who've shared an experience, even though there's somewhere along the line there was differences obviously, but that they died the same way
mhm,
is incredibly bonding. And so it's just been very healing for me. And then, I talked about talk saves lives. I think for the fact that there are so many people suffering with different types of mental illness. And so one of the reasons behind my charity also is about normalizing the conversation around mental illness and mental health and raising awareness about it. So I don't funny enough, I don't feel overwhelmed when I have these conversations. They don't bring me sadness per se.
mhm,
I feel sad for the people on the other line because generally they're newer in the situation than I am, and that
mhm,
is heart-wrenching because it's a heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching thing to have to
yeah,
move through. But I also believe that by talking about it, I just feel happy that maybe I gave them one little nugget they could take away in the conversation to help their healing
yeah,
journey a little bit easier. So
yeah.
that's
It
it.
I'm just hearing from you that it feels for you so in alignment with who you are and where you're going and what you wanna say in this world, that it just feels like you're very in touch with the bigger picture. It's like, "This is bigger than me. This
Yeah,
is,"
yeah,
and I feel like
100%.
that helps get through the parts that are about you,
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, it's
Yeah,
so true. And
yeah.
it's really interesting that you said that because, just like anything, starting a business, starting a charity, like they're all kind of the same thing. And you feel like you're in it alone, right?
Mhm,
So, where I've found my voice, it's interesting. My siblings have not.
mhm,
Like they don't, I go to the walk every year.
yeah.
And I'll go by myself if I have to, but I usually can find a friend or 2 to, like, tag along with me. My siblings can't go. It's
Mm,
really difficult for them to even 8 years later be at the walk surrounded by these people. They find it very sad. They don't go to my charity events, and
wow,
I don't find that I had a hard time at first accepting it,
yeah,
but now having one-on-one conversations with them, it is just so hard for them to
mhm,
be there, and they appreciate what I'm doing. They love the fact that I can do this, but they cannot, and
yeah,
I'm okay with that. So it's really like I said, this is my 3rd year that we've had this charity, and so we have a annual event now that we'll have in November. November 10th, we have our soiree. So last year, November was my second one. The first one we launched 6 weeks before, I was texting people going, Hey, you want to be on an auxiliary board? Hey, what are you doing in a few weeks? I was reaching out to people that I knew were maybe connected to suicide or had lost someone or have people in their lives who've battled with mental illness who might say yes.
Mhm.
And so me and 8 women, I put on this event of do we do it? Do we not? This other, COVID's still here. And so our friends loaned us their gorgeous home with a gorgeous side yard so we could have outdoor space. And we had about 165 people show up
Wow. That's
in a
incredible. For
6 week
your first
turnaround.
year, I
Yes.
mean, for any year, but for your first year, that's
Yeah.
incredible.
And we raised $90,000.
Mm.
And then we had
Go
another one,
girl.
a bigger
Wow.
event last year, my second event. We had 265 people and we raised over $180,000.
Wow.
So
Congratulations. It's
I guess kind of
amazing.
what I'm saying
Yeah.
is you feel like you're on this alone. And there are times I literally say to myself, anyone, what are you doing?
Right.
Why are you doing this? You've
Right.
got 2 kids, you've got another business. Like this is like it is starting a charity. I'm not going to lie to all you people listening.
Yep.
It is starting a business. You have a
Mhm.
board of directors. I now have an auxiliary board. All these things I never knew I needed to have or thought I was going to have.
Mhm.
But when we had 265 people show up and I stood up on that stage and I went, wow,
Yeah.
like this is important to so many people out there.
Yeah.
And just by me being comfortable, maybe, or using my voice, and I don't know if it's being comfortable, it's me not wanting any other family to go through what me and my family had to go through when we lost my brother. And
Mhm.
that's why I use my voice. But to see these people show up
Yeah.
and you're talking, and then, I know this isn't, Bruce Springsteen with 60,000 people in a
Oh, man,
stadium.
it's
Yeah.
a ton of people.
But to
Yeah.
have, a couple hundred people
Yeah.
out there who show up,
Yeah.
and pay a ticket price like
Yeah.
that they want to be there is like unreal to me.
Yeah.
So I just keep doing what I'm doing and hope that I find more people to connect with or are connected with me on this journey. And we keep building. I have people asking to be on my board of directors now and asking to be on my auxiliary board. And
Mhm.
they came to a pop-up shop and heard me speak and want and believe in this. So it's really, for me, it's purposeful and I'm passionate about it. And I love it.
Yeah. It comes through very clearly.
Oh,
Just
thank you.
truly. I mean, it comes through. And I think that's part of it too, is that people are touched by this organization because you are making a connection with them. And
Yeah.
you're like you just said, it's coming through and you want to be a part of that. Like I feel like what you said earlier is so on point as far as the isolation, right? Like we really like culturally we don't talk about suicide enough. We don't want to talk about it. We don't know how to talk about it. We're not taught we're hardly taught how to deal with grief in general, let alone this type of grief because it is different.
Yeah.
And so I can imagine if you're trying to figure out how and you hear someone speak about it who can and wants to, it's like, oh, give me more of that. Like,
Yeah, yeah,
give
yeah.
me more, give me more.
W We see it
Um,
more now, right? I mean,
yes,
we as we've grown up, I mean,
yes.
my this is an interesting story. So after my brother died, we didn't know how he died initially. So it
Mm,
took us a day of figuring that out. I had to go drive to my parents' house that night. We just knew he had died and go tell my parents, we've lost Mark and we didn't know how yet. And the next day we found out how he had died. And I I just remember barely packing a bag the night I was going to tell my parents, throwing a bunch of stuff in there, knowing I'm going to go stay at my parents for a few days. And I drove out there, and the next day we found out how Mark died, and that was earth shattering. And one of the things me and my dad did while I was staying at their house is we went for a walk. We held hands and we went for a walk throughout his community that he lives in. And the day we found out about Mark, I had told one of my friends, I said, don't call me. I texted her, don't call me. We found out how Mark had died. This is how he died, but don't call me.
Mhm.
Well, she called me, so she called me right away. And so I'm, talking and crying to her about everything. And we had a friend who lost a husband a couple years before to
Mhm.
suicide. So as a friend group,
Yeah.
we were almost positioned to support each other.
Wow.
We knew what to do.
Yeah.
So I started talking freely with her, and then my other friends kept calling, and I was talking freely with them. And me and my dad go on a walk that day, and my parents did not want anyone to know how Mark died. That was their initial reaction, right?
Mhm.
And my dad goes, how are you so open about talking to your friends about this?
Yeah.
I just am telling people that he died by heart disease, because he was looking at it as a broken heart.
Mm.
That's what my dad was thinking. And I just said to him, I said, Dad, if you're not open about it, you're not going to heal.
Yeah.
And I said, by being open about it, you're going to open up all these windows and doors in your healing process and in this journey that you didn't even know were possible.
Yeah.
So he took some time to process it. And he ended up getting a phone call from one of their dear, dear friends who they knew many, many years ago, who lost a son. He was actually friends with my brothers in high school,
Mm.
and they lost their son, and their son died by heart disease.
Mm.
They called my parents, and my mom and dad told them, for the first time they spoke the words out loud, Mark died by suicide. Their friends admitted for the first time in 45 years,
Wow.
43 years, that they too lost their son by suicide. And
Oh my
that
gosh.
chokes me up just thinking about it.
Yeah.
But they opened up this world, that this heaviness that this couple was carrying for 42 years.
Wow.
They now opened up this world to them, where they started going to church. They haven't seen each other in years. They started going to church together
Wow.
and saying, and praying together and finding a connection and a way to talk with each other about their experiences. It's like, to
It's
me,
beautiful. It really is. Like it's
yeah, it's incredible,
yeah. Yeah.
and it
Wow.
was almost a gift to
Right.
this couple to kind of have to release that heaviness that they were carrying around all those years. It's
Yeah.
incredible to me.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um,
Given what you just said, what advice do you have for those of us listening that aren't as close to this type of death? Like what would you want to hear? What wouldn't you want to hear? Like what do we get wrong? What do like we're not taught what to say and what to
Yeah,
do. Like what
yeah,
advice do you have, or some best practices maybe for someone picks up the phone, calls you, shares this news? I guess what I'm really saying is do's and don'ts.
yeah. I Okay, so my dues are, um, call them and talk about it like you would any other death.
Mhm.
Years ago, when I was growing up, cancer was called, it was whispered, the C word. They would
Mhm.
whisper it, and no one would talk about when people had cancer. And I believe that if now, so the stigma's been erased from cancer. If my brother would have died by cancer, people would have said, oh my God, I'm so sorry. How long did he suffer? What kind of cancer did he have?
Yeah.
Was he in the hospital long? Like all of these questions, right?
Right.
But no one knows what to do when it's suicide, but it's still a death, and these families are still grieving. So please call,
Yeah.
reach out. Don't be afraid to have the hard conversation. Um, the one don't that has just been taught to me during this journey is, don't use the word commit. They committed suicide.
Mm.
People don't commit heart disease. They don't commit cancer. They
Mm.
die by.
Yeah.
And knowing that people were struggling with a mental illness at that time, most
Right.
likely,
Right.
that they die by suicide. So I would say, from my learning, that is the only don't.
That's a good one.
Um, but a lot more do's are, reach out, ask them to go to coffee, to dinner, and listen,
Mhm.
because they need to talk.
Yeah.
They need to share. And again, I mean, what I've learned, and we all know this through our journeys in life and losing people, is that everyone grieves differently, right? So
Mm.
some people may not be ready right away,
Mhm.
but don't give up. But that doesn't mean hammer them daily. Give
Mhm.
them 30 days, 60 days, reach out again, let them know that you're there
Right.
and that you're willing to be there for them, because there is going to be a day where hopefully they say yes.
Right.
Direct them to this healing conversations, part of AFSP, direct them to that and let them sign up to have a conversation with someone who understands what they're going through.
Mhm.
And I mean, I'm putting this out there, but I would be more than happy to be a healing conversation for people. Everyone needs some sort. So just don't hide, have the real conversations, understand that the person who died is not selfish. That's a huge don't.
Mhm.
They just were hurting so bad that they thought what they were doing actually was the most unselfish thing.
Yeah.
That maybe they were being selfish by living in with this disease and hurting their family members and not being able. So their thought process is really different than people who aren't struggling, right? So
Mhm.
don't ever think and don't ever say that what this person did was selfish. That would be my other don't.
Yeah. Yeah. Two things are coming to mind. I think as far as the healing conversations go, I mean, the added like the talking, like you're saying, is so important. But I think to add to what you're saying about the idea behind the healing conversations and having someone who understands what you're going through, just can only emphasize the importance of that and the benefit of it. I've shared on the show before. My sister-in-law passed away a few years ago, and I was talking to family and friends, but when you're talking to family and friends who also are affected by that person's death, you speak a little bit differently in my experience. Like I'm aware of that person's feelings. I'm aware of maybe what they're thinking, and I'm also responding to what they're saying. And I just recall the first time my therapist asked me to take me through, her diagnosis to her death. Like, don't leave any details out. Just go back. And it was like the first time I could say everything very unedited, very unapologetic about it. Like everything that angered me, everything that disappointed me, everything that upset me, that was sad, that was hard, that was this, like things that I wouldn't feel comfortable sharing with the people in my life. That was the most impactful conversation and gave me the most closure because even though I had been thinking all of those things, it's just different when you say things out loud to another human being. It just makes such a big difference.
Yeah. Yeah, I love what you just said there. That's really amazing. And what you're right, when you are talking to family members, you're worried about them too,
Yeah,
right? And you're asking about them and how are they doing, and you're not sharing your specific experience
right.
with how this death affected you, because it doesn't want to become a competition of who's more
Right.
sad or who's hurting more or who's,
Yeah.
so therapy, 1,000% when you've lost someone to suicide or any loss. But I did see a therapist, and I neglected to say that earlier because I've been babbling on about a million other things. But that therapist was amazing. And just like you said, I can share my experience with the way from point A to point B, what that was like. And that was incredibly healing. And some of my siblings thought therapy. My parents did seek therapy. They have a great program in Chicago. We're really lucky. It's a lost program through Catholic Charities, and it's a non-denominational program,
Hmm.
but they offer free therapy, which my parents
Wow.
didn't have the means to get a therapist to pay for. So it was incredibly impactful for them. But I would say therapy was one of the best things that I ever did in my life. And I did it for as long as I felt I needed it. But what I was saying earlier is I noticed my siblings, the one who went to therapy and the ones who didn't,
Mhm.
and the ones who didn't just struggle that much more.
Yeah.
Because I don't know that they've had those conversations, right? Or those really
Right.
real conversations.
Yeah.
Even if you want to throw your fists and throw a tantrum and go me,
Exactly. Yes,
like they haven't
exactly.
been able to have that,
Yeah.
and so I see that they're on a different healing journey than I am too.
Yeah. It's a I used closure, but it was also such a release and
Yes.
relief. Like it was just like off of me now. And it doesn't mean that I don't think about it still or,
Right.
but it's like I've already aired that, aired it out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's wonderful. I'm glad you did that.
The other thing I was thinking, um, when you mentioned, not using the word commit and, I think at least for me, prior to the last few years where I've really experienced, significant depression and things like it was hard to fathom how someone could be in such a state of mind that that would be the answer.
Hmm.
Um, and I think just again to reiterate and confirm your point that it's not whoever you think that person that's thinking at that time is like not it's not the same person. Like
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
I feel like I remember saying to my husband, this is a while ago now, we're better, but I just remember saying to my husband at one point, I'm like, look, I need you to know I'm I'm not going to take my own life, but I now have an understanding of how people could.
Yeah.
Because you feel I'll speak for myself. I literally in my own mind, it was like, who is this? Who is this person? Like I'm thinking things that don't make sense, that don't feel right. And like when I should clarify when I'm thinking them, that's not it. But it's like when I kind of come out of the depression, it's like I look back and I'm like, whoa, like who
Yeah.
was that? And so
Yeah. Yeah.
it really, it's so far from selfish.
Yeah.
It's so far from because it's not the same the rationale behind someone without suicidal thoughts versus someone who is like they're just on different playing fields. They're not you can't compare them.
Yeah. Yeah. It's that's 100% true. I mean, I've known people who've died because they were in physical pain. They've taken their own lives.
Mhm.
So sometimes it's not just the mental health that they're
Yeah,
struggling with.
yeah.
Um, I know 3 instances of people who've taken their lives because of the physical pain they're into,
Mm,
and it's really just pain,
yeah.
right? So whether
Yes.
it's physical or mental, you're agonizing,
Yes.
and you like they couldn't deal with the physical pain.
Mhm.
You can't deal with the mental pain that you're in. They
Mhm.
go there's this phrase in Vietnam, same, different, but it has a lot of similarities, but
Mhm.
they can't wrap their brain around it any longer.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's suffering at its greatest. I mean,
Yeah.
truly.
Yeah. All right. I also wanted to ask you the significance, if any, in your own words, of the name Under the Same Sky.
Oh, thank you for asking that. There is significance actually. So, it was hard. It's hard to come up with a name
Yeah.
for a charity. That's first of all. So, I mean, I'm running lists. I mean, if you'd see my list of the names that I was always, thinking of doing, and and do I make it about suicide? Will that draw people in? Will that deflect? Do I make it about mental health? And then you start researching names, and believe it or not, every name is taken. Whatever name you think you're going to find, it's gone. Like it's not there anymore. So while I was on my first buying trip in France, and I was buying things to bring back to my studio to do this pop-up shop to raise more money, there was this beautiful artist in San Remi, and she had this gorgeous painting she did of Frida Kahlo. And at the bottom of it, it said, "Under the Same Sky."
Mm.
And I took a photo of that piece of art, and I love art. I'm super connected to art. And I got home and I thought, this piece really speaks to me. I want this piece of art. So she sent it to me. And when I received the piece of art, I just looked at what she wrote and I was like, done.
Yeah.
And it really was about the fact that I was on this journey of traveling, right? And buying things, also sharing my story where I was traveling to let people know what I was buying for. And that you realize that no matter where you are in the world, everyone is battling the same battles. Everyone is going through the same things.
Mm.
So at the end of the day, we're all under the same sky together. And we're all here to raise each other up and to help each other. And if you're ever lost for connection, and I think of looking up in the sky and seeing a million stars and know that there's other people out there rooting for you and cheering you on. And I just believe that we're all in this together.
Yeah, I love that. That's really amazing.
Thank
It captures the spirit of what you're doing. So I appreciate that. And thank you for sharing.
you.
Um, is there anything about your story with your brother or your charity that I didn't think to ask you about that you want to make sure to say today?
Yeah, no, I mean, I could talk for hours more, but I will stop. I've got lots to say. But no, I mean, my charity is my passion project. I mean, I'm passionate about what I do right now. We have our event in November, which
Okay.
we'll have again on November 10th in Chicago. And it's really a wonderful event. This is not a sad event. I, it is not a sit down dinner. It's more of a cocktail. We have a great DJ. I want this to be uplifting. It's about connection,
Mm-hmm.
and it's about bringing people in the same room to talk about a difficult subject,
Mm-hmm.
or know that we're there about a difficult subject, even if we aren't talking about it. So I usually get up and speak about 10 minutes, and we have a lively paddle raise, and we have an art auction that is off the charts. As I said earlier, I have this connection to art. I always have. And so I do this series on my design channel, Amy Kartheiser Design, where I do these Meet the Makers, and I go and visit an artist, a local artist, or sometimes on my travels, I'll find an artist and we, talk about their art.
Cool.
And these artists, without me ever asking for a piece of art, have asked to donate. This is how the silent auction got started.
Wow.
Is these artists, when I would go meet, even before I had my first event, said, I would like to donate a piece of art towards your charity.
It's amazing.
And so at my first event, I had 9 pieces of art that people donated. And that's how we came up with our silent auction.
Wow.
So our silent auction is now, we limit it to 15. I have artists asking to donate. So we start a list ahead of time. It's incredible. And I mean, we're talking about $10,000-$15,000 pieces of art from these Renee Romero Schuler, Eric Gushy. If you're into art, you'll know these artists and other artists. Like, it's incredible. And it's so touching that they give their art to this. So that's our silent auction at the event. And then I continue to do, May is Mental Health Awareness Month. I continue to do my pop-up shop in my studio, but I've also been asked to take it on the road. People want to host it. So a couple places in Florida. And I think that's amazing that they want to give up their space and host it. So I'll travel and bring all my stuff with me. So that's, everything that I can think about right now, but I just appreciate you asking me to be on the show, having this conversation with me, allowing me to have this conversation with your listeners. It's really been wonderful for me to be able to do this. So thank you so much, Christy.
Yeah, no, thank you. I think what you're doing is incredible. And I'm just picturing you all over France and all the places. Like, just that's amazing. I love that people were just like, here, let me donate this. Like, I don't know. Everything just feels like literally the stars aligned for
Oh,
you to do this and this to be your mission and your passion. And what a way to honor him and his
Yeah.
life. And
Yeah.
it's so honorable. And just thank you for what you do and for sharing so much of your story today and with the world.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it again. And thank you for allowing me to be here again. Thank you so much.
Wow, I'm just in a little bit of shock over the array of emotions that I am feeling right now. Of course, I am tuning into the pain and sadness of the loss of Mark and Amy's family and the story she shared and her pain and her grief. But I'm also really tuning into her passion and pride that she takes in running her nonprofit. Amy and I talked a little bit more about this off air after the interview. And I just, as a woman, as a mom, as a human, I'm really inspired by her. Many of us have thoughts to do things, but we don't often take action. And Amy did. Amy heard the voice calling her and she listened and ran with it. And now she has a full-blown nonprofit. Her organization has made a significant impact, raising substantial funds for suicide prevention, creating opportunities for conversations to help survivors feel understood and less alone, and fostering connections that otherwise would not be made. I put a link to Under the Same Sky's Starry Night Soiree. If you are in the Chicago area and want to attend, please check it out. And if you know someone who died by suicide or know someone who does, please share her website, the website for American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, and reach out. There are people and resources who want to connect with you and support you. It's just one of those moments where two things can be true. It can be so painful and tragic that this world lost Amy's brother, Mark, and yet something so beautiful has come from it. Amy has found her voice and her passion, and her loss is now propelling her to help so many others out there who are grieving. And I think it's incredible. It really is. Thank you, Amy, for all that you do. You're an awesome human being, and I'm truly looking forward to seeing what you do next in this world and with your nonprofit. I thank you for being here and for listening, and I'll see you next time. Bye.
Thank you so much for tuning in today. Sass Says is a production of Luann Nigara, Inc. This podcast is meant to be educational and not meant to replace professional therapy or professional medical attention. To learn more about today's show and what's new in my world, head over to sasssays.com. Thanks so much. Talk later.